Bring in Maura Gillespie. She's founder of Blue Stack Strategies and a former press advisor to the former Speaker of the House, John Boehner. Maura, good to have you.
Nice to be with you, Jim.
Let me ask you for your reaction to this verdict. Do you share the criticism that you heard there from Senator Rubio, Vance, and others? Do you believe that this conviction was rigged, in the words of the former president?
I don't think you can say that about a 12-person jury that is, of his peers, to say that it's rigged. I think that they handled the information that they had and they made a decision. I was surprised by it just because I do think this case of all that has been brought against the former president was the weakest and the most convoluted. But I think what it really drives home, so I'm not going to sit here and defend Donald Trump, I'm certainly not, but I think what it drives home is this idea of, being above the law is one thing. We don't believe anyone is. I agree with that. But what happens if you become the target of the law? And I think this case and what Republicans are going to message from here on out, I think until the election, is that, would Trump have been, this case brought against him if he wasn't running for president again? So I think that does call into question what Americans are probably thinking at home. I don't know that it moves the needle too much as far as showing support versus or against, for or against the former president. But it does call into question, that what's at stake here, and what repercussions does this have moving forward for our democracy?
The problem with that argument, right, is that Trump and his supporters, they celebrate indictments of their enemies, right? I mean, Trump attacks the Justice Department for the indictments regarding his alleged attempts to overturn the election, celebrates the fact that they've indicted Hunter Biden, right, the president's son, or Senator Rob Menendez, a Democratic senator from New Jersey. They like when the system, in quotes, goes after their enemies, but they don't like when it comes after them. And I just wonder, what's the principle there? I mean, I get the argument that they feel that, particularly with this case, would not have been brought against others. I get that argument. But the thing is, they are very happy to celebrate cases, even from the same institutions, right? Whether it be the Justice Department or someone else, if it's going after folks on the other side.
And I don't disagree with you. I think that is one of the most frustrating parts about, this matchup yet again. But just as where politics is right now, the hypocrisy runs rampant, I'd say, in politics. But it's really hard, to watch as both sides do it. They cherry pick issues, but then contradict themselves left, right, and center. And you see that a lot with the Trump campaign, and now to, his supporters who are going out to speak on his behalf. You don't have to necessarily like Donald Trump or even want to vote for him or vote for him to recognize that this situation, this case, may not be the strongest one, and wonder about that. And I think, for voters, that's going to be something that they think about. They don't have to vote for either of these two candidates, Joe Biden or Donald Trump, but to have a question about the integrity of our institutions, that to me is the most troubling part.
Yeah. Of course, there's been some polling, not since the conviction, about how much this factors into voters' decisions. And I know that from Trump himself and many of his supporters and spokespeople, they're saying this is going to help him. And by the way, they brought in a lot of money overnight. They're saying they brought in some $34 million overnight since this conviction. But I wonder what the truth is inside the Trump camp. Are they actually concerned privately that this could damage him, or are they truly confident that this is going to perhaps help him, and not just with his base, but even with independent voters?
I'm sure that they are churning out the fundraising. I've gotten several messages today generated from different fundraising efforts on his behalf. So that part, I'm sure they're thrilled about, the money portion, which, again, a lot of this is driven by money. However, I think he is probably very concerned about what happens, between now and, the next, finding out what's going to happen to him. I think, for his team and for his supporters, this question of, the vice presidency becomes even more important, and the legal parameters of, does he need to look ahead to, potentially a pardon if it gets to that point down in November? I think those questions are certainly being asked within the Trump camp. So, the vice president pick becomes even more important, I would say, and that's probably where their focus is. But I'm sure he's worried about, being sentenced to jail or things of that nature. I don't know that the judge would do that, but I'm sure they're playing out all the scenarios, I would hope.
No question. Well, Maura Gillespie, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.